In the heart of a towering glass building, where ambition gleamed brighter than compassion, Alexander Reed, known to the world as Mr. Reed, the unshakable CEO, walked through the marble corridors of his empire. Every step echoed power. Every glance from an employee was filled with fear and respect. But behind those sharp eyes and perfectly tailored suit lived a man whose heart hadn't felt warmth in 3 long years. Ever since his wife, Emily, died in a car crash, Alexander had buried his emotions beneath deadlines and profits. He ruled his company like a machine, but his soul had gone silent. It was just another rainy morning when he entered the building, holding his coffee cup and checking numbers on his phone. The world outside was gray, matching the emptiness inside him. The janitor, Mr. Carson, a humble man in his late 50s, greeted him softly, "Good morning, sir." Alexander didn't even lift his head. He had long forgotten what kindness felt like. But fate has a way of whispering when you least expect it. That same morning, Mr. Carson's daughter, Lily, came to visit him. She was barely 10, tiny, bright-eyed, wearing an oversized school sweater that had seen better days. Her father couldn't afford daycare that day, so she quietly sat in a corner of the lobby, sketching flowers in a torn notebook while her father mopped the floor. As the elevator doors opened, Alexander stepped out, cold, unreadable. His briefcase brushed past the little girl's backpack, knocking something small and metallic to the ground. Lily looked up, startled by the soft clink that echoed on the marble floor. She noticed a small, heart-shaped locket glinting under the light. It must have fallen from the CEO's pocket when he reached for his phone. "Sir, you dropped this," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Alexander paused mid-step. The sound of that sentence hit him like lightning. Slowly, he turned around, his eyes falling on the tiny golden locket in Lily's hand. For a second, time froze. The world around him blurred, the noise, the people, everything. He felt his breath catch in his chest. That locket wasn't supposed to exist anymore. His hand trembled as he took it from the little girl. It was old, slightly scratched, but unmistakable. Inside it was a small photo, his late wife, Emily, smiling beside him under a cherry blossom tree. A picture he thought was lost forever after the accident. The locket had been missing for years, and yet here it was, in the hands of a janitor's daughter. He could barely speak. "Where did you find this?" Lily blinked. "You dropped it, sir." Alexander's throat tightened. He wanted to say thank you, but the words got lost somewhere between shock and emotion. He nodded stiffly and walked away, his heart pounding harder than it had in years. Behind him, Lily smiled innocently, not realizing she had just reopened a door that grief had long sealed shut. In his office, Alexander sat down, staring at the locket like it was a ghost from his past. The faint scent of Emily's perfume seemed to linger in the air. For a moment, he closed his eyes, and he saw her smile, heard her laugh, felt her hand in his. A tear rolled down his cheek before he could stop it. The man who hadn't cried in years suddenly felt human again. He pressed the locket to his chest, whispering, "Emily, how did this come back to me?" Outside the glass walls of his office, the storm clouds began to clear, and sunlight broke through. For the first time in years, the light actually reached him. As he stared out the window, his gaze caught something on the security camera feed, the janitor and his little girl laughing together as they cleaned the floor. Something inside him stirred. For the first time in forever, he envied that kind of warmth. That bond. That love. That night, Alexander didn't go home to his empty mansion. Instead, he stayed late at the office, replaying that moment, "Sir, you dropped this," over and over in his mind. The innocence in her voice, the purity in her act, felt like a message from his late wife herself. And though he didn't realize it yet, that tiny moment of kindness would soon unravel everything he thought he knew about life, love, and loss. If you've ever lost someone you loved, you know that some memories never fade. They just wait, quietly, for the right moment to return. And for Alexander Reed, that moment had just begun. If you believe even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because sometimes, stories like these remind us that love never really leaves, it just finds new ways to return. The next morning arrived with the golden glow of dawn reflecting off the tall windows of Reed Enterprises, but inside Alexander's heart, there was a storm that refused to settle. The locket sat on his desk beside a half-empty cup of coffee, glimmering faintly as though it carried a heartbeat of its own. All night, he had tried to make sense of it, how it had found its way back to him after 3 long years. He could still hear Lily's innocent voice echoing in his head, "Sir, you dropped this." He knew it wasn't possible. That locket had been lost in the wreck that took Emily away from him and shattered every piece of joy in his life. Yet, there it was, resting right before his eyes like a sign from the heavens. As the morning sun filtered through the blinds, Alexander rose from his chair and glanced at the security footage from the lobby the previous day. He watched Lily's tiny figure as she picked up the locket and returned it with such honesty, such purity, it made his chest tighten. Something inside him urged him to know more about that child, and the man who worked silently every day to keep his empire spotless. For the first time in years, curiosity replaced indifference. He called his assistant, Sarah, into the office. "I need the file on the janitor, Mr. Carson," he said, his tone calm but carrying the authority of a man used to getting answers. Sarah blinked, a little surprised. "Of course, sir," she replied and hurried off. Within minutes, she returned with a thin folder, almost too thin for someone who had worked there nearly 10 years. Alexander flipped through it, his eyes catching details he'd never cared to read before. Harold Carson. Widowed. One child, Lily Carson. Lives in a small rented apartment on the east side. Salary barely enough to get by. The file even mentioned that he'd refused company assistance for school fees, preferring to work overtime instead. Alexander leaned back, closing his eyes. There was something noble about that, something he couldn't explain. Later that day, as employees rushed through the corridors, Alexander stepped into the maintenance area for the first time in his career. The staff froze, unsure of what to say. The CEO never came down here. But he wasn't there to intimidate anyone. He found Harold wiping down the equipment, his face lined with years of quiet struggle. "Mr. Carson," Alexander said, and the janitor immediately turned, startled. "Sir? Is everything all right?" "I just wanted to thank your daughter for returning something important to me," Alexander said softly. The older man's expression softened, and he smiled. "Lily has a good heart, sir. Her mother always taught her to do the right thing." That word, mother, stirred something deep within Alexander. "Your wife?" he asked carefully. "She passed away when Lily was 5, Harold replied quietly. "Cancer. She was strong until the end. Lily still talks to her every night before bed." Alexander's gaze drifted to the floor, the weight of shared pain filling the silence. "I'm sorry," he murmured, and for a moment, the two men, one powerful, one humble, stood connected by grief. Then, Alexander looked back up. "The locket? I thought I'd lost it years ago. Do you know how your daughter found it?" Harold frowned slightly. "No, sir. She said you dropped it. Maybe it fell from your coat pocket." But deep down, Alexander knew something wasn't adding up. The locket had been missing since Emily's car crash, and that wreck happened far outside the city, miles away from this place. There was no way it could have simply fallen from his coat. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying Harold's words in his head, her mother always taught her to do the right thing. He didn't know why, but those words felt strangely familiar, almost like something Emily herself might have said. The next day, as Alexander walked into the lobby, he saw Lily again. She was sitting beside her father, drawing in her little notebook with a bright red crayon. When she saw him, her eyes lit up. "Good morning, sir," she said cheerfully. Her innocence was disarming. "Good morning, Lily," Alexander replied with a faint smile, the first real one in years. "What are you drawing?" She held up her notebook shyly. "It's a lady," she said. "She's wearing a necklace like the one you have." His breath caught. The drawing was simple, childlike, but there was something about it, the gentle smile, the flowing hair, the familiar eyes, that made him feel like he was staring at Emily herself. "That's very nice," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady. "Who is she?" Lily smiled proudly. "That's my angel. She visits me in my dreams. She tells me to be kind and brave for Daddy." Alexander froze. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it. "Your angel," he whispered. "What does she look like?" Lily tilted her head thoughtfully. "Like her," she said, pointing at the locket hanging around his neck. The same smile. In that moment, the world seemed to tilt. His hands trembled as he stared at her drawing again. Could it be? No, it couldn't. But deep inside, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope. A fragile, dangerous, impossible hope. The thought haunted him the entire day. He couldn't concentrate on meetings or reports. All he could see was that little girl's smile, and her angel with Emily's face. That evening, after everyone had left, Alexander sat alone in his dimly lit office, the city lights flickering below like 1,000 tiny stars. He opened the locket once more and traced Emily's face with his thumb. "Are you trying to tell me something?" he whispered into the silence. "Through that child?" The air felt heavy, yet strangely peaceful. He leaned back in his chair, lost in thought, unaware that this small connection was about to unravel a truth that would change everything he believed about fate, love, and loss. And if you're watching this story unfold, remember, sometimes life brings people into your path for a reason you can't understand yet. Stay with us, and if you believe love can return in the most unexpected ways, make sure you're subscribed. Because the next moment in Alexander's life will leave you breathless.